Welcome, everybody, to Indiana Football Weekly on the Gruely True Sports Network. Indiana Football Weekly is brought to you by BetNow.eu for a cash deposit on your first deposit or a cash back bonus deposit. Make sure you use the promo code TRUTH100. I'm your host for Indiana Football Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in Cole Hanna. How you doing, Cole?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, Mike. We're discussing an Indiana football team that's in the top 25 for the first time in my lifetime. So it's kind of an uncharted territory right here.
I know we literally did an Indiana Ball State preview show that had 300 listens. And the last 2 weeks, we've had over 3,000. So I figured, since we're bringing in big numbers, then it's time to bring in the heavy artillery. So let me welcome, without further ado, an Indiana... I think it's safe to call you a legend, isn't it, Ken Sterling?
Well, it sure is. You know what? How many people have spent 6 years down there in the effort to get an undergraduate degree?
I'll tell you, I thought that was awesome what you tweeted out about the punter who is, getting a 6th year. I thought it was great.
Your 6th year is going to be your funnest year. You know where everything is. You know where all the fun is. You know where the kind of the pitfalls of academia are. You know what you're doing, and it's just you coast through that 6th year. And if you've done things right through the first 5, you got about 9 hours in the fall semester, 6 in the spring, and you're ready to go and absolutely waste your parents' money.
So why would you just take all 15 hours at once and get it done?
Well, because then I'd have to go home and get a job. If you stretch it out through 2 semesters, you're going to have a
are we
lot
safe
more
to
fun.
say you took like 9 credit hours every semester for 6 years?
Well, it's, as successfully or unsuccessfully, I started out taking 15, and it kind of, I winnowed as I went, and it became a lot more fun to go to school toward the end.
All right, I understand that. Cole is right now a freshman, and he's 29 years old.
But better late than never, right?
All right, but he's been going since he was 18. All right, guys, we're talking about an Indiana Hoosier team that is actually ranked in the AP Top 25, not in the college football playoff rankings yet, at 24. They are 7-2. My question is this: is this team that good, or has the schedule been that bad, Cole?
Yeah, I think you've got to take it with a little bit of both, I would think, because, they have not had what you consider a signature victory. I think they've had some big victories in the context of just, where Indiana's been historically as a football program. Anytime you can win 4 straight Big Ten games, I don't care who they play, for Indiana to get the job done in 4 consecutive games is relatively unheard of. And, they've played some tough games on the road, and they've played some, easy games on the road. And historically, it doesn't really matter. They've found ways to lose those games. And what's changed with this team is they've found ways to win those games. They've gotten the stops they needed to at the end of the game, whether that be key turnovers or, key drives in the game to get the ball in the end zone. They've just found ways to win games instead of finding ways to lose games, which is what they've historically done. But, and we've talked about this before in the show, Mike, they're still looking for that key signature, upsetting a top 25 opponent. They don't have that one on their schedule. They don't have any single one you can look at and go like, wow, they really impressed me there. So, they're still looking for that. They have a couple opportunities to get that one coming up. So it's definitely, the schedule has definitely helped them out. But for Indiana to find ways to get victories, that's something they typically don't do regardless of who they play.
Yeah, even the at Maryland and at Nebraska, Kent, those are basically 500 football teams, which in the past, Indiana doesn't beat 500 football teams on the road.
You couldn't count on Indiana to win against any team in the Big Ten, and they have won 4 this year. But those 4 are against the 4 worst teams in the Big Ten. To your point, their combined Big Ten record, 3-23. And so while, we applaud like crazy and they're 7-2 and they're going to a bowl and all that stuff, comparing Indiana at 7-2 with a team like Penn State, who's 8-1 and has some respectable wins on its resume, I'm not sure that Indiana's ready to go to Happy Valley and emerge successfully from that kind of challenge. That's a big deal.
Well, I think the big key to this, Cole, is how Penn State handles coming off a tough loss at Minnesota, because it's one of two things. You're either pissed off and you're coming out to show everybody that was a fluke, or you just basically probably lost a shot at the national championship in an undefeated season, and maybe you're a little bit down. Which way do you think this goes?
You know, the optimist in me would like to say, you know, they're going to be a little bit down and maybe IU can sneak up on them. And, you know, with the way Indiana plays them, with Penn State having to go to Ohio State the week after, I don't know if that factors in at all. But yeah, I tend to agree with Ken. I just don't see Indiana really having what it takes to, you know, go in there and get the win. I just think Penn State is probably all around a much better football team. And that's not taking anything away from Indiana. I just think Penn State is, you know, one of the few national powers we have in college football, not just in the Big Ten, but nationally. And their one loss is now to a top 10 ranked Minnesota team. So, you know, even, you know, when you look at a program like Penn State, even one loss, and we're talking about, okay, they're disappointed. You know, that's such a drastically different scenario than Indiana, where we're blown away that they've only lost a couple games. And we're talking about a Penn State team whose season seems to be, in a lot of people's minds, they're done because they lost a football game. So you just have two programs, I think, on two completely different pedestals. And, you know, the optimist in me says they're going to be down. That, you know, they may not have gotten over the disappointment from last week, and IU can sneak up on them. But I just can't see that scenario playing out.
When we look at Penn State, Kent, I think there has to be some concern in Happy Valley over the passing game with Sean Clifford. He's coming off his shakiest performance of the season. He had 3 interceptions, doubling his season total.
Right.
And since October 12th, he's barely completed over half of his passes. I mean, he's got some home run targets, but where I think Indiana does have a chance here, not a huge chance, but I think there is a chance, and my chance comes from this. Up until the last 2 weeks, Indiana didn't cause turnovers. And now it seems like since the Nebraska game, the last 2 or 3 weeks, they are causing some turnovers. They have, I think, maybe one of the best freshman cornerbacks in the entire country. So I think there is a way here. You're going to have to cause some turnovers. You almost always do in any game, but especially on the road. But I think there is a way that this game can be won.
You know, Tywan Mullen he's got to stop being a freshman and start being a kind of an upperclassman and start competing at a really, really high level. Not where Indiana fans are used to seeing a cornerback, but seeing a guy who may project toward being an all Big Ten guy, because that's what you have to do against Sean Clifford. Like you mentioned last week, 3 picks. He's got 6 for the season. He does have a home run target in KJ Hamler, who's just absolutely terrific and lightning fast and averaging almost 17 yards a catch. They've got to put pressure on Clifford, and they got to hope Clifford throws it to you. That's the way Indiana can stay in this game. If Indiana forces turnovers, you really can kind of mitigate the difference in the talent level and the depth level between these two rosters. And if you don't, then you got big trouble. You know, if you're even up turnover-wise, this is just a better team than you are, playing at home, red-assed after getting pantsed up at Minnesota and losing their opportunity to go to a college football playoff, or nearly losing it. If they lose this game, it's all done. It's sayonara, and you're playing for the best bowl you can go to, and that's not enough. That's enough for us. We love that at Indiana, but at Penn State, that's not enough.
Yeah, and when I look at this, the Penn State running game is what concerns me big time. They seem to have gone away from the idea of running back by committee. Noah Kane has been limited at best, but Journey Brown has taken on the bulk of the rushing attempts lately. Brown is coming off his second 100-yard game of rushing with 124 against Minnesota. So that has to be a big concern for Indiana, because Indiana's had a hard time stopping anybody outside of Northwestern when it comes to running the ball, Kent.
You know, Journey Brown, 6.5 yards a carry. And that's so you're going to have to decide, if you're Indiana, what kind of you're going to key on, whether you're going to key on Clifford and Hamler or you're going to key on Brown. And I don't think that Indiana is good enough defensively simultaneously. So you're going to have to pick and choose and hope that you guess right, depending on the play call from Franklin and his staff. Maybe Indiana can get that done. Maybe, you know, between the coordinator, who I really, really like, good dude, and Tom Allen, you can put together a game plan to kind of stop Penn State. But, boy, Sean Clifford's awfully good, regardless of what he's done the last couple of games. And this, you know, just a little, because we like coming with tidbits, this is not the first time that Sean Clifford and Peyton Ramsey have faced each other. You go back to 2015 when Ramsey was at Elder and Clifford was at St. X. That game went 2 overtimes, and Clifford and St. X beat Elder 24-17.
Yeah, and St. X and Elder is one of the biggest rivalries in the entire country for high school football. And Peyton Ramsey, of course, played for his dad, who's the coach there. I think his name's Doug, but I've seen him speak at a couple coaches' clinics. The other thing about going on the road is I think you can't give up big plays, especially at the start of this game. And Kent talked about it, Cole. KJ Hamler is a big-time threat, but you've also got a dependable tight end on Pat Fryermuth, whatever the hell his name is. I'm not good with names like that, but Fryermuth sounds good to me. So with this, I mean, I think this first 10 minutes of this game may decide what kind of game we've got here.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys talked about, KJ Hamler is just a big play guy, and that's going to be, Keelan Mullen's biggest test of the season. I mean, he's been absolutely outstanding all year long. He's played about as well as you can reasonably expect from a freshman, or probably even above that. He's truly been a shutdown corner for them, but KJ Hamler is an entirely different beast. I think that matchup's going to be very, very important to watch. And like you said, Fryermuth is he's a big red zone target for Penn State. I mean, he has 7 touchdown receptions on the year. And Indiana tends to struggle at times, I think, especially with tight ends running up the seam and up the middle. It feels like oftentimes they tend to kind of bust those coverages, and someone misses an assignment. That always seems to kind of break their back. And especially even going back to Michigan State game, I think it's one of those games where you kind of saw Indiana just kind of get killed for different big play after big play after big play, especially in key situations where it's like, just make the stop here, and you're sitting in good shape, and then they give up a big play, and all of a sudden, it breaks the camel's back, so to speak. So, I think containing the big play threats for Penn State's going to be important. I think getting, forcing them into turnovers, that's what Minnesota did last week. That's how they're able to win that football game. If you can kind of make them turn the ball over, kind of get those momentum game-changing plays, I think Indiana has a chance here, but they're going to also have to put up a lot of points on a very, very good Penn State defense, because I don't think Indiana's defense is going to shut down Penn State by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that's realistic. So the offense is going to have to do their part as well.
No, and I really think the key to this game, Cole, is Stevie Scott. I think Stevie Scott is better than what his numbers show, because I don't think he had a lot of offensive line help at the start of the year or play calling help. So I think we got to go into this game, and we have to run the ball.
Yeah. And the Indiana running game started off the season really, really slowly. And a lot of people are asking, what's going on with Stevie Scott? Why are his numbers down? But really these last few weeks, he's really started to come alive. And granted, he was taking advantage of, I think, some poor defensive teams in Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska. But Northwestern has been, by most statistical measurements, a very, very good defensive team, especially in their ability to stop the run. And Stevie Scott had a very good game against them, 26 carries, 116 yards, and 3 touchdowns in that game. One of those was receiving. So he's really come alive.
That's okay.
They've gotten, I think, improved offensive line play, especially after Coy Cronk went down, which is very interesting to see. It's like that was almost a moment that kind of brought the offensive linemen together, and they, kind of figured, okay, we all need to step up to replace them, and they've played much, much better, and they've gotten the run game going. But Penn State is, I think, probably hands down the best defensive team Indiana's played, and if you look at Pro Football Focus, they grade Penn State as the best run defense in the Big Ten. So, I think especially without having Penix, and you have to go to a guy like Ramsey, I think you're going to need that balance in the offense that can, make the defense stay honest. And I think, like you said, Mike, that's going to be one of the huge keys to this game. Can they run the ball? Can they get Stevie Scott involved? And I'm not sure they can. I like what I've seen from the offensive line the last few weeks, but like I said, Penn State's just a completely different beast defensively, so they're going to have their hands full.
Yeah, and Ken, my biggest key overall, does head coach Tom Allen go into this game playing to win it, or does the moment change the way he's going to coach this game?
That's a great question, because he's never won a game like this. We've never seen him be successful in a game like this. We've seen him come close in games like this, but he's never been successful. And to your point, Stevie Scott he's kind of gotten it rolling. He's gone for 100 or better in 3 of his last 4 games after not getting 100 in any of his first 5. So things start to look a little bit good. And Peyton Ramsey is really compared. He's very, very similar to Michael Penix, not in form, but in numbers, with one notable exception, and that's that Ramsey gets sacked. He's been sacked 11 times, Penix only once. And if they've got to play behind the sticks, if they've got down and distance working against them, it's going to be a really, really long afternoon. They've got to have Stevie Scott ready to go, get them 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. And if they do that, they got a chance in this, because then you get to go to work with Wop or with Donovan or with Freifogel or Peyton Hendershot, and you got a chance to be able to throw the ball at a time when Penn State might not expect it. And I think that's when you're going to have to be successful.
Yeah, and the other thing about Clifford at the quarterback position is he seems to be a guy, to me, who is faster than what people realize until they play him. I think the Hoosiers would be best kept kind of keeping a spy on him the whole game. And you need defensive ends to contain. We need to try to keep him in the pocket, Kent, because I think his legs may even give him a bigger advantage than what a lot of people even realize from looking at him.
Yeah, he's a really good runner, and that makes it almost – and that's something that Indiana's had a tough time with, obviously. I mean, they've had a tough time with a lot of things. But one thing that they've really had a tough time with is containing a quarterback with good legs, good wheels. It seems like they can get pressure on, kind of guys who are immobile, and they can get some coverage sacks. But you know what? When a guy's mobile, when you've got a triple threat guy, you got real problems if you're Indiana, because they're not that kind of defense yet.
All right. Indiana's not used to Cole playing in front of 110,000 people, but I think if you combine all their home games together, they've played in front of 110,000 people. I think it helps that this game is at noon instead of 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night also.
Yeah, well, and definitely I think you're probably going to have a tamer crowd given the Penn State loss last week, and I'm sure that sucked a lot of wind out of Penn State sails. At least I'm hoping that's what happened, but I guess we'll see come Saturday. Yeah, I mean, the environment's going to be tough. It's always going to be a somewhat intimidating environment to play in. It's one of the biggest stadiums in the country. And, like to your point, Indiana, has not really gotten used to playing in front of those, massive crowds. I mean, they played Ohio State at home this year, so they didn't go there. The only stadium that's even remotely close, I would say, is probably Michigan State, but still that's a significantly smaller stadium than Penn State. So it's going to be kind of uncharted territory for a lot of the younger players and Indiana's team. They play a lot of freshmen, a lot of redshirt freshmen, and really haven't experienced an environment like that on game day. So, how they handle it, that's going to be a huge, huge question mark. Because, some guys, when they get in the moment, the spotlight can be just a little bit too big for them. And, being a top 25 team and all of the, talk that's going around about, this hasn't happened since 1994, there's going to be a whole lot of eyes on Indiana, a lot more than that's been on this football team historically. There's a basketball game on that same day, and I think, most Indiana fans are probably going to be tuning into the football game way before the basketball game, which is probably something that historically has not happened for Indiana. So there's some hype around the team. They're going into an intimidating environment. How they handle that, I think that'll be key, and I think that's really on the coaching staff there. They've got to get them prepared and ready to play and ready to handle that environment.
All right, Kent, when's the last time we saw an Indiana game that was this big?
Probably 93, right, against Ohio State. That was a huge game where really there was a potential Rose Bowl berth on the line during that game. And other than that, I mean, there have been some lesser games. I don't know about lesser games, but there was a game that made them bowl eligible. The bucket game back in, what was that, 06? That was kind of a big game, and that was fun, but they haven't played to win an eighth game in a quarter century, so this is completely uncharted territory.
Yeah, the closest I remember on Indiana-Penn State would have been 1994, because that was the great Penn State team, I think, with Kajana Carter, and IU almost upset them at Memorial Stadium. I think we lost the game like 30-27 or 31-28.
They came back late, I remember, right? Came back late and really screwed up Penn State in their ability to become nationally relevant and a national championship type team. I remember that Penn State was really unhappy that they allowed Indiana to crawl back into that game way late.
And I think 93, I think the Penn State game was the one that knocked them out of a shot at the Rose Bowl because they
Is
lost to
that the
Penn
one?
State and Ohio State back-to-back. Penn State was ranked like 20th. They weren't near as good as they were the next year. But IU was ranked, I think they were ranked higher than that. They were somewhere between 15 and 18. And they lost by a touchdown at Beaver Stadium. And then they lost by 6 points at Ohio State. And then they got blown out by Virginia Tech.
The halcyon days of Indiana football.
Yeah, the only game I remember really being bigger was the 1987 Michigan State game.
Yeah, that was huge.
Because
and didn't Lorenzo White run for like 7,800 yards? I mean, he'd still be running if not for the end zone.
Yeah, because that was the one game I remember watching, and it came down to basically if Indiana wins this game, they go to the Rose Bowl. I was so excited and so disappointed. They beat us like 27-3 or something, and Lorenzo White just destroyed us. I didn't like him his entire career because of that.
Well, there were a lot of guys to pick from, guys who beat Indiana badly and put up gaudy numbers that we learned to hate.
He's the only one I remember,
though. A whole lot of them.
Because he kept us out of the Rose Bowl. That was the only shot at the Rose Bowl since I was born. And I was born in 1968. So, and the thing that sucks is this. I was born in 1968, but it was at the end of 1968, so I wasn't even alive when they went.
Yikes.
And Cole wasn't even alive for the Independence Bowl in 1993 or 94. Cole was alive for like the Poland Weed Eater Bowl of a couple years ago.
It's been the high point of Indiana football in my lifetime.
What would be the high point for you? That year they played in the Pinstripe Bowl against Duke?
Yeah, I mean that, or I can't remember the bowl game they played. I think it was the year after that against Utah. Foster Farms Bowl, maybe I think is what it was called. And
that's a legendary bowl. Me and Kim were thinking about writing a book about the history of the Foster Farm Bowl. It'll be a short story.
But go get them.
It'll be a short story. Did we win or lose to Utah?
We lost.
Because I literally don't care how much I like the team. If they're like 6-6 and playing in the Foster Farms Bowl, I've probably got something better to do.
Well, because I remember because Utah, I want to say, was a top 20 team in the country in the rankings when Indiana played them. And Indiana, I think, was winning for most of that game. And then, in typical Indiana fashion, they found a way to lose at the end. And,
that's what that was.
The story
Utah was disappointed to be in the Foster Farm Bowl. IU was excited. Yeah. IU jumped on him real quick. And then at halftime, Utah's coach walked in to say, "You guys know you're losing to Indiana, right?" And Bob Knight's over there, not over there. But all right, we gotta make a pick. Cole, you first.
I would love to pick Indiana. I just don't see it. I think the moment's probably going to be a little bit too big, and I think Penn State's probably going to be a little bit pissed off. I think Franklin's a good coach, and they'll have them ready to play. But I'll say Indiana keeps it close for a while, but Penn State pulls away in that second half. Penn State 31, Indiana 17.
All right.
Ooh. You know what? 31-17, that's an interesting number because it's just inside the line. This is a 14.5-point spread. Indiana, obviously, an underdog. I'd love to, just like you, Cole, I'd love to pick Indiana. I'd love to invest in Indiana if I were so predisposed. But I think that Indiana's going to get beat. I think it's going to be ugly early, and Indiana's going to lose this one and not cover.
Okay. Stevie Scott runs for 200 yards, and the Hoosiers win 23-17 in overtime. Somebody's got to do it. What the hell? It's not like I'm betting any money on it.
Yeah, and this isn't the Penn State, football weekly show. It's Indiana, so one of us better be a homer.
Yeah, but see,
and give people something to root for.
Since you two cheered for Penn State because you picked them, then that means that I can post this on Penn State sites too. We'll get more Penn State fans on the network. Now, I think Indiana has a legit chance to win, but being an Indiana fan, I know they're not. But I was actually going to give the exact same score that Cole gave, but he screwed it up for me. So I'm picking Indiana 23-17.
Hey, one place where we've got an advantage is with the kicker. Logan Justice has missed one kick this year. That kid's been just money. He's missed one extra point. He's 12 of 12 kicking field goals. If it comes down to kicks, I like our chances. How about that for optimism?
Well, how about this, though? If it comes down to Logan Justice kicking field goals a lot, we're definitely going to lose. But if it comes down to the last second and Logan Justice is kicking it, then Logan Justice has never kicked in front of 110,000 white shirts in Penn State on a huge stage. But I still like our
He's got
chances.
ice water in his veins.
I'm telling you right
ice
now.
Water Logan Justice.
If you could give me Logan Justice from 48 yards right now to win the game, I'll take it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Especially if the game's tied. But, all right, guys, any final words, Kent? And tell everybody where they can find
I'm
you.
hoping. I don't want people to think that I'm anti-IU. I just don't see any way that coming off that beatdown last Saturday that Penn State isn't going to show up ready to play. And that was really Indiana's only hope, that they were going to kind of sleepwalk through it for a portion and be allowed to stay in the game. I just don't see it happening. And all you Indiana fans who want to yell at me on Twitter at Kent Sterling or go to KentSterling.com.
All right, and it's Ken Sterling all the time on the internet. So this is the other thing. The guys yelling at you, if you gave them $50 and said you have to go bet on the game, they're probably betting on Penn State.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
Cole, you're a college student, so you don't have $50. You got any final words?
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with Ken. I would love to pick him. I just don't see it happening. I think Penn State losing was probably the worst outcome Indiana could have had last week. I think their best chance is that Penn State wins that game, goes into Indiana, overlooks them a little bit because they have a huge showdown against Ohio State the next week, and winners probably going to the college football playoffs. But now they lose, and Penn State's probably going to be a little pissed off. And I think Franklin's a good coach, and he'll have them ready to go. So would love to see Indiana win. And I think they have a chance. I don't know if it's a good chance. It's probably a relatively small chance, but there's a chance. And I think Indiana's feeling confident as well. But I guess we'll see what happens on game day.
All right. I think they've got like a 31% chance, but I think it's coming through. 31.4 now. It keeps going up in my mind. All right, guys. I want to thank Kent for coming on. Make sure you check him out at KentSterling.com. You can follow Cole Hanna on Twitter at ColeHanna5. Correct, Cole?
Correct, yeah.
All right. We're going to wrap it up, guys. We will be back probably Monday or Tuesday next week with Indiana Football Weekly because I got to go to Panama City on Wednesday. So it's really not that great. It's to coach football, and it's only going to be like 60 degrees, so I can't go jumping. I usually like to go looking for sharks when I get in the ocean, but I don't think I'll do that this time. All right, guys. You can hear us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spreaker, anywhere you find podcasts. Just Google The Grueling Truth. It's all Grueling Truth all the time. So for Kent Sterling, Cole Hanna, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.